Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're looking at the two-part story, The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances. It's the first story written by Stephen Moffat, aka The Beginning of Your Pain.
Okay, yeah, it's very funny, but I wasn't sure how soon I would bring this in, but oh well, I'll do it now. So, I'll just start right off the bat by saying this is a fantastic episode.
Of course, yeah.
But really bordering on a masterpiece for me. There are maybe a couple of flaws, but they're not even story flaws. They're more to
Mm.
do with the style and the editing and the direction. Genuinely moving. I got really quite emotional watching it, and I've watched it twice to prepare for the podcast, and the second time basically just as emotional as the first time. Really just a knockout story from Stephen Moffat, and he deserves all the praise he gets for this. Now, having said all that, it was very interesting watching this story because there are a number of Moffatisms, I suppose you could say, which while they're either, I guess like benign in the context of the story, in other words, like they don't have any real negative consequence, they're just kind of there, or they actively help the story and are fantastic. Those same Moffatisms that are in this story, I really think they're the same Moffatisms that drive me up the wall in later seasons when he becomes showrunner, and we'll get into what all of those are, but that's just my general impression of the story. Um, having having said all that, yeah, despite my reservations about Moffat's writing and what it will become, this absolutely, if not a masterpiece, then borderline on it, and deserves all the praise he gets
Oh
for
no,
it.
100%. There's a reason why he took over when Russell T Davies
Mm,
left.
mm-hmm,
I don't think there is a single one of his Russell T Davies era stories that isn't beloved by, at the very least, a huge portion of the fan
mm-hmm,
base.
mm-hmm.
Um, I think most of his Russell T Davies stories won the BAFTA for short form fiction or
Really
whatever it is. I can bring it
nice.
up because it is interesting to have a look at that that award and how the
Hmm.
history of it since 2005 comes about. I'll do that before we get into any of the rankings. Yeah.
Sure,
Oh no,
sure.
sorry, not the BAFTA. The Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation Short Form.
Oh wow, nice,
Yeah, I
nice.
can run through the list from
Mm-hmm.
2006. So
Sure.
2006, Empty Child Doctor Dances wins.
Mm-hmm.
2007, Girl in the Fireplace wins.
Mm-hmm.
2008, Blink wins.
Mm-hmm.
2009, Silence in the Labyrinth Forest of the Dead is nominated alongside Turn Left, but it loses to Dr. Horrible's sing along blog.
Right.
The next year, The Waters of Mars wins it.
Was What of Mars a Stephen Moffat story?
No, I'm just running through the
Oh, pardon me. Yeah.
things.
Anyway.
He didn't write any stories for that year of the show. Next
Oh,
year,
okay.
it's The Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang that wins it.
Mm-hmm.
The year
Mm-hmm.
after, it's The Doctor's Wife that wins it.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't any Doctor Who stories that win after that point.
Huh.
Looking at what. So, Asylum of the Daleks, Angels Take Manhattan, and The Snowmen all get nominated, which is confusing to me. Adventure in Space and Time, The Day of the Doctor, The Name of the Doctor, and the Five-ish Doctors reboot get nominated,
Mm-hmm.
all of which lose to a Game of Thrones episode, Reigns of
Mm-hmm.
Castamere.
Mm-hmm.
Then Listen gets nominated, Heaven Sent gets nominated,
Hmm.
doesn't win, which I would say is a travesty, but it loses to the finale of Jessica Jones season 1, which, fair enough.
I haven't seen it, so I
It's
can't.
very good. Return of Doctor Mysterio gets nominated the next year. Then, I'm so sorry, but Twice Upon a Time gets a nomination. It loses to a Good Place episode.
Yeah.
Actually, The Good Place wins a lot of these. It pretty much sweeps every year afterwards.
Hmm.
And then a bunch of Chibnall episodes get nominated, but we don't need to talk about that.
Um. Okay. Okay, Mr. Hugo, if that's what you enjoy, sure.
Okay, small tangent aside, I just think it's interesting because it for everyone who's has a problem with the Moffat era, you can't, at the very least, you can't fault giving him the position based on the quality of all the scripts he put out before that point. Okay, so on the timescales, both The Empty Child and The Doctor Dancers have a 9.2 average rating.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, 100% of the time that is the correct response. It's the highest rated Eccleston story for a reason. It is probably the most consistent single story of his run. Because I think you could make the case that the finale has just as much acclaim, and it doesn't. The way it wraps up the Time War arc for Ninth Doctor is fantastic, but it is still part of a 2-part episode with Bad Wolf, which is kind of inconsistent. So I think this and Dalek are the 2 highest rated stories, and both of which deserve to be there.
I think I prefer Dalek myself, and not just because of my reservations about Moffat, but that's a separate discussion. So, but 9.2 definitely, that sounds right to me.
Empty Child has a 9.2 for plot, and Dr. Dancers has a 9.3.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're both... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's just... it's one of those great examples of building intrigue. And unlike a lot of Moffat stories that do this, this one actually has a lot of decent payoff in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. That is kind of among the sort of Moffatisms that I noticed here that, again, in later episodes annoy me, but here, it's working so fantastically. Like, the plot is just... It feels like not only is it tense, not only is there a lot of stuff happening, but again, once you get to that ending, the climax, it just feels so emotionally satisfying.
Well, it's also great how it has like a whole lot of different stuff going on. Especially in the first episode, there are so many different threads that they're following. There's the space junk that they're chasing. There's the child. There's Jack. There's the Nancy and her stuff. And, you know, they're juggling all these balls in part 1. And then in part 2, you expect them to drop at least 1 or 2, but it finds this magical way of making every thread from part 1 part of one cohesive narrative in part 2.
Yeah, sure.
Which
absolutely.
is rare for this many different plots. You'd normally expect, okay, we're resolving the main plot, and now it's resolved, let's check in with the characters and resolve some character-based B-plots. But no, it's all done in one go. Especially
given that, so this is, two 45-minute Doctor Who episodes, so it's shorter than most, classic Who episodes, which are about, 4 parts. It goes for about 100 minutes. But they're doing more with the plot in this 90 minutes than I think I've seen some 6-part classic Who stories do. So I think that is another reason why this story has as much acclaim as it has, and why that acclaim is deserving, certainly.
Part 1 has a 9.3 for acting, and Part 2 has a 9.5.
Yeah, I can't think of anything really. I mean, you could argue maybe some of the extras playing the gas mask zombies aren't like reaching these super amazing, super intense dramatic heights that the others are, but that's simply because they're, like they're extras, and I think it also goes to the editing and direction as well. But like that again, that's a nitpick. Beyond that, I can't fault really any character.
Well, they're also wearing gas masks the whole time.
That's true. Yeah, that's also
you can't really fault that. But no, everyone turns out a really good performance in this. There are a lot of nice emotional moments, especially with Nancy towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've got Richard Wilson in there, who is just an icon.
He's the Doctor, isn't he?
Yeah, he's Dr. Constantine.
Yeah. He does a really wonderful job.
Both episodes have an 8.7 for effects.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised the bit where Rosie's dangling from the rope and she's looking down. I mean, maybe that doesn't look like the most realistic shot of its kind you've ever seen, but it looks pretty good.
Well, that's the
I
one.
think.
That's the one shot that really stands out as looking a little off. Like even when we see the gas mask transformation happen twice, like you can tell that it's animated, but it's still effective.
Yeah, they make it really work because there's a kind of with the shape of the gas mask, just as a face, I think there's a risk there of making it comical because it's you getting big googly eyes and your mouth is expanding, but there's almost something kind of uncanny about it that you almost want to laugh, but you can't because it's so horrifying just watching people's faces just warp and twist into this sort of emotionless, bug-eyed shape.
Well, yeah, it's nightmarish body horror. The way that you can, especially in the first transformation, you can physically see the ventilation almost being forced up Dr. Constantine's throat.
Yeah, and you can see the pain on his face, like just the physical pain, which is testament to the performance as well. But even other scenes, because they do like with a lot of the special effects in this season of Doctor Who, at least, they do use it a bit sparingly. They're using a lot of sort of quick cuts and showing or hinting at more than they're showing, which is great. But either way, it's still working really, really well. You get that terror, and again, given that transformation, I think there was always a risk of making it look really goofy. The fact that they pull it off as well as they did is admirable and just purely chilling. So
I think a huge part of that also goes to like the sound design of those scenes, the way you can hear bones like being molded and reshaping as the transformation progresses. It's just like spine tinglingly.
Yeah, it's really it is pretty icky. In a Cronenberg kind of way. You just sort of yeah, I remember even especially with Dr. Constantine's changing, you just kind of it just makes you feel icky, but like in a really kind of good way. Like you really get the fear and the terror. And that is heightened later on when Nancy is trapped with the soldier who's transforming, and there's that horror and the tragedy that he's realizing, oh, I'm going to turn into a monster and there's nothing I can do about it. And I have to actually say, whatever my criticisms of Moffat are, from this point onward and certainly in later seasons, the one thing he is good at doing, even in the seasons where I take issue with his writing, he is actually really good at playing up the horror element of Doctor Who.
Absolutely.
Whether it's this, whether it's the Weeping Angels, which I will unequivocally say are genuinely one of the greatest monsters ever created in Doctor Who.
Oh, easily.
They do all the great things that great, terrifying Doctor Who monsters do. They're doing that and then some, so that was great. But even that scene in, and you'll have to remind me what the name of the episode is, but the Mondasian Cybermen, when...
Yeah, it was World Enough in Time.
Yeah, like in the hospital, and you realize that these sedatives is actually just a volume control. That
is even chilling moment.
Even back then, I don't know whether it's just because I've had a lot of experience being in hospital, but sweet Jesus, that made my skin crawl so much.
Yeah, it's such a effective moment.
Yeah, so he Moffat definitely deserves praise there, and it's all on display here too. Because there's a lot of the horror of it is underscored by a real palpable sense of tragedy, and you really feel it. And he knows how to, pluck at the audience's heartstrings in that way. So, good for him, honestly.
Both episodes have a 9.1 for replay value, which, absolutely. Yeah. These episodes you can watch over and over again.
It was just as good the second time watching it, so absolutely.
But there are also a couple of moments when, you're sort of rewarded for rewatching it. There are a couple of moments in part 2 where the main one I want to highlight is when they're in room 802, where Jamie was
Mm-hmm.
kept while, like, shortly after he was
Mm.
found, and they're listening to the tape of
Mm.
Dr. Constantine trying to ask him all the questions. And at a certain point, you realize that the tape has run out, but the child is still talking. On a
Yeah, yeah,
rewatch, you can hear when that starts, but the
yeah.
first time through, it's
It's pretty seamless.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's also effective horror in a way. You know,
Oh yeah,
when you start
absolutely.
realizing it with them, and you're like, oh no. And
Yeah,
they do it with a typewriter as well in the same episode. There's a similar thing where you
yeah.
can start to hear the clicking of the keys.
The fun little Shining reference. That was funny, but yeah, no, that's definitely another example of that, and it works very very well.
Mm.
So yeah.
So part one, 7 out of 109 people say you need to have seen a previous episode to get this one.
I think that number is about correct. I mean, maybe if you want to get the if you want a better understanding of the Rose and Doctor relationship, but to Moffat's credit, he actually does a pretty good job of, I think, establishing that relationship. Um, and even, and again, this is just goes back to the Moffatisms I noticed, but even really early on, just the rhythm of the conversation between Rose and the Doctor, it feels like a very Moffat conversation.
Oh
I'm not
yeah,
exactly
definitely.
sure how to explain that, but um, it does. And even if that, again, some of that sort of thing does get on my nerves in later Moffat episodes, he makes it really work here. You get a real sense of fun and good banter between the two characters, and you can see the bond of friendship, excuse me, being solidified there. So that's great.
Yeah, I would agree. Part two has 119 out of 128 people say that you need to have seen a previous episode, which you do.
Yeah,
Part one, I
yeah,
don't know. I don't know why 9 people said, "Nah, just go into this one blind. You're fine."
yeah. No, you definitely need to see both.
Nonsense. Um, okay. Let's jump into the discussion proper.
Mhm, mhm.
This is probably the closest Doctor Who can do to a zombie film. Like
Would
when,
you say Waters of Mars is kind of similar because they've got that kind of don't they
I
have like a turning quality to them where they
yeah,
make you like them and
I see Waters of Mars as a bit as more Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
yeah, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the thing, sort of a
Yeah,
deal.
because
Fair enough.
with this, like, I mean, I suppose both the same, but in this one, there's a lot more of the horde mentality
Yeah,
of a zombie thing, whereas with that one, it's just a small crew. Here,
yeah,
we've got all of the people in the hospital, and it's the people at the army site eventually as well, and the way that they all slowly approach the TARDIS crew, and it really is kind of like a zombie thing. You get too close to the kid or anyone that he's been in contact with, you get this infection. It slowly takes you over, removes your humanity, effectively kills you, and then you're replaced with a mindless creature whose only purpose is to go around making more of you.
yeah. That's
You couldn't do proper zombies in Doctor Who. You could never get away with that.
yeah. It would certainly be tough, but this kind of works both. It's sort of using the constraints of both special effects and in a way censorship to really good effects because it's so simple,
Hmm.
but it's so chilling. And I guess it makes sense that these monsters, even I think by Rose in the first episode of the revival with Sarah Jane, like she literally calls them gas mask zombies. So
Yeah.
yeah, that horde mentality, and using the uh physical symptoms as plague sort of a thing. Um, yeah, I think it's safe to call them a zombie, certainly a zombie-like creature.
Hmm. And
So
it's
that's fair.
it's it's one of the few scripts in this series that seems to understand the technical limitations
Yep,
of its era. We
absolutely.
only get 2 shots of uh the transformation process. All other special effects in the story are, well, first of all, the opening shot of the TARDIS chasing the ambulance, which is honestly pretty well animated. It looks pretty good, all things considered. Then you've got the nanogenes, which are really easy to put in.
Yeah, just bits of light.
They do the effects super well, and then it's just Jack's ship and the bomb and that, which all looks fine. And it's really sparing. And they also found a really clever way, setting it in London during the Blitz at nighttime. That's a great way to, not require as many extras as you would normally need for a London setting.
Yeah. You just deal with this, with small locations. I mean, the bit where the Doctor goes into the ballroom with the singer, that's probably the biggest the cast gets. Apart from the zombies, but
yes.
But yeah, no, that it is a clever way of doing it. Actually, I can't believe I just noticed this properly, but this whole story takes place in a very small amount of time. It's all isn't it basically all in one night?
Yeah, it's all the one evening.
That's so great. It really sort of ratchets up the tension, which is really, really wonderful. But you're quite right to also point out that, again, they're using these limitations to their benefit. This goes back to what I've always said about Doctor Who, particularly with Classic, but clearly with a story like this, where between those limitations, between the inability to make their creative visions as grand as perhaps they want to, between that and creative ingenuity, there's this wonderful space of genuine innovation, and I think this episode proves that, and Moffat would again prove it with the Weeping Angels. So, again, kudos to him and the creative team.
Well, I'll also say that from this first episode, you can really tell that Moffat is a Doctor Who fan. Not just with understanding the technical limitations that they're working with, but you can already see his perspective on the characters shining through. There are elements he's seeding here that will become very important when he takes over. This is the first episode of the revival to actually have a character say Doctor Who, which, as you know, is something that he will love to do in his era, and in fact becomes one of the focal plot points of the Matt Smith era. This idea of the Question being Doctor Who. That gets set up here. We also get this idea that we get a Santa Claus Father Christmas reference. He will eventually use Nick Frost as Santa in a Christmas special later on. It's just very apparent. He knows about the Don't Wander Off rule. He has the Doctor talking to a cat. Even though all the other children are afraid of the empty child at first, when he hears that the kid is scared of the bombs, his compassion takes over and he's like, okay, I'll let you in. He understands that side of the character. You can really, really tell that this guy is a big fan, and it makes a lot of sense that Russell T Davies, when conceiving this season, gave Moffat the only 2-part story not to be written by him. It just seems like a no-brainer. And he also wrote the Curse of Fatal Death special way back when, so he clearly knows the show inside and out enough to parody it on a first attempt.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, he was the obvious choice to take over the show in 2010. You would not have given it to anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Maybe you could have given it to Mark Gatiss, but I think, you're not wrong to point out that Moffat's, clear love of the show made him, the strongest contender. I find a lot of the things that you just mentioned about all the setups, I don't think they're as, super impressive to me, simply because most of them are just setting up the Moffat era, and as I've said, a lot of issues there.
Well, it's less. But I don't think it's he's not putting in this stuff going, one day when I take over, this will become important. it's just like this idea of the character that he mentions that there are a couple of references to the Doctor having a family before, at the very least, the Time War, which is also something that gets hinted at a bunch. Not even in the Moffat era, it becomes very important in a later Tennant episode. This idea of the Doctor previously having a family. It also implying that Susan died at some point.
Right.
Dr. Constantine saying, I was a father and a grandfather, now I'm neither. And the Doctor going, yeah, I understand. I get the feeling. It's a weird implication that this, the idea that Susan isn't around anymore. I never really thought about that.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, the last time we would have seen Susan at all would have been the Five Doctors, so goodness knows what happened there. And I suppose, if, the Time War happened and the Doctor knows he's got no one left, then that, a line like that would make sense. So, like, I think it does make sense that you draw out the fact that there's a level of care and detail to Moffat's writing of the Doctor that's certainly, on principle, very admirable, which makes sense.
Yeah. Another thing that Moffat does in this episode is introduce a character that will become very important moving forward, Captain Jack Harkness.
Yes.
Played by John Barrowman. And you got to say, has there ever been a character introduction more suited to the character than the way Jack is introduced in this story?
Yeah, I think
that first 30 seconds that he has on screen, it perfectly encapsulates the character. It's perfect.
Yeah, and even just as an introductory episode, we get all kind of a lot of nuances in the writing of his character, because he's got that roguish streak, and you even detect a kind of not sinister, but like a feeling that, oh, maybe he's kind of selfish, or maybe he could put people in danger and not really care. But then, beyond sort of the roguish sort of joy the character has, you detect a kind of a sincerity and a warmth, which is really good. And I think Moffat does a lot of good things there, because he's introduced as this very sort of suave, funny, charming, seducer of everybody, and that's kind of the surface level. But as the story goes on, you detect that there's quite a lot more depth here, which is very interesting.
Yeah, well, I think it shows when he's describing the way his scheme works, and he makes sure to point out that he programmed it so it wouldn't, hit any living creature or living thing. The way there is that sort of extra compassion there, where he's like, I'm going to con a time agent, but I want to make sure no one gets hurt in the process.
Yeah.
If this was just your standard, everyday con artist with, just looking out for himself, money and anyone I can seduce under the sun is all I care about, he would have just gone, just chuck it at a planet. If it hits anything, whatever, there's casualties in war. But the fact that there is that extra compassion that is shown very early on, while we're learning he's a dirtbag con artist, the fact that they establish that warmth, it makes it a lot more compelling in the second episode, when he is sort of working with the Doctor and Rose to try and help out, and it endears you to him a lot more when he does get his redemption at the end of this, so that when they do go back and save him, you're like, oh yes.
Yeah, he and I really enjoy, particularly in this second episode, because he keeps saying, "Oh, it's not my fault. It's not my fault." But like every time he says that, you can feel, the nails kind of being driven into a coffin, where you feel like, maybe he knows something more than what he's saying, and there's a kind of a guilt complex coming in there. Maybe I'm biased in saying that because I've obviously seen both episodes, but those little nuances of the guilt slowly coming through until finally he realizes, like, holy shit, what have I done?
Yeah.
Is really good.
I agree.
Yeah, just wonderful.
And, like, perfect casting.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sure if this was Barrowman's breakout role. I mean, at the very least, it was into the mainstream. I'm positive he had a career before this. But, like, good God, he became real big real quickly after this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
To the point where they gave him his own spin-off.
Yep.
And
when did Torchwood start?
I think it started in 2007.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, the way I haven't seen it, but the way I understand it is that the first season of Torchwood, its ending lines up perfectly with Jack's reintroduction in Series 3.
Right.
I think at the end of Series 1, he hears the TARDIS land in Cardiff and he runs off.
Huh. Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. We'll have to watch Torchwood at some point for this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't know further. I mean, it was pointed out to me when I was still quite young, but I didn't know for ages that Torchwood is an anagram, which is pretty cool. Is that a Russell T Davies series? I want to say it is.
I don't know. I can look it up. At the very least, he conceived it, but I'm not sure if he
he created and show ran it.
Yeah, I know that he was had a big involvement in Sarah Jane Adventures. It was created by Russell T Davies. Torchwood was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere that Chris Chibnall was one of the big players in Torchwood, but I can't.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So in the first series, for the first two series, Chris Chibnall was one of the lead writers. Russell T Davies was only involved in the first season.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah, it'd be interesting to take a look at Torchwood. I've seen a couple of episodes, but not much. Doesn't Capaldi show up? I think in an episode.
Yeah, I think he plays a recurring role in one of the seasons, which when he was cast added to the mystery. Because he obviously plays a character in The Fires of Pompeii, but people who also know about his appearance in Torchwood were like, "Oh, is there something there as well? Is this part of the mystery?" And it turns out no, it was just the Fires of Pompeii appearance that was important to the mystery they were setting up with his regeneration. But oh well.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jack's great in this, and
yeah.
This idea of the time agency as like this 51st century organization that does, I don't know, something.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, is it like almost like a police force or a because it's kind of what it sounds like, or I suppose it could be like a corporate thing. Well, they don't really give a lot of detail in this episode, at least.
You'd have to think that some agency that was responsible for policing the timeline, at least surrounding Earth, would at very least be familiar with the Doctor.
Yeah, that's true.
If not, have stepped in at some point to assist when things were threatening Earth. Like I'm not sure what they were doing when the Daleks meddled with the fourth great and bountiful human empire. I'm not sure why they didn't spot that one. But maybe they can only look backwards in time, because 200,000 is nowhere near 51st century.
Yeah.
I don't know. The time agency is defined very well in this. It doesn't need to be, but it would be interesting to explore it a bit more in the future.
Yeah, because it seems like one of those things that would recur. Like, it would be interesting to sort of see, because it is a human thing. Like,
it sounds like it anyway.
Because it would be interesting to see, how a human time agency looks at time versus how the Doctor as a Time Lord looks at time. So having that sort of conflict would be interesting. It is a shame that they haven't done anything with it, but who knows? Maybe RTD will bring it back.
One last thing about Jack before we continue properly. It is amusing to watch how Jack is characterized in this as this, 51st century guy, and by that time humanity has become a lot less picky.
Mm.
In terms of romantic and sexual preferences.
Mm.
It's amazing to watch that and still subscribe to the theory that Doctor Who is only woke now. Like, I'm not sure if this counts as, it's never been political, but it's surely on the fringe of that, at least.
I find it very funny, and I'm sure I've said this before, Cuff, but I think we've mentioned that, Doctor Who has always been political in basically every podcast, but you know what? I think as you pointed out earlier, we're gonna keep doing it anyway, because it's true.
However long it takes to hammer the message home to our audience of 10 strong. That the show has always been political and always will be.
Yes, I'm sure those 10 people are having a lot of infights over the topic.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing but squabbling in the comments of every YouTube upload that we do.
But yeah, no, I think it does kind of count, I guess, in that, again, even from the beginning, obviously some things from especially the classic series ethically have not aged very well, but like that basic sort of left-wing view of the world has always been there, and if you don't realize that, then like it's simply wrong. It's inaccurate and ahistorical to say otherwise, I think.
Yeah. Nancy's a really good character in this.
Yeah, she's great.
Arguably the
really
heart of the episode. Even before the twist comes in at the end of the story, the idea of her leading this gang of homeless children who ran away back to London after being relocated, and breaking into houses during air raids to feed. It's a really interesting idea, and it's something that could be its own story, like outside of Doctor Who. I would depending on what's built upon that premise, I would be genuinely interested in watching that story standalone.
Yeah, it's it has such a compelling element to it, because you just feel so bad for Nancy and these kids, and you're just waiting for them to come right. Actually, I just realized something. Nancy's the name, of the character in Oliver Twist, yeah?
I mean, it could be. I don't know. I'm not familiar with Oliver Twist.
I'm gonna kick myself for not remembering this, but I'm gonna look it up anyway.
There is a Nancy in Oliver Twist, yeah.
Yep. That's the character, and I don't doubt for a second, because even the Doctor says, I don't know whether it's Marxism in action or like a West End musical.
A West End musical, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't doubt that those sort of Dickensian roots are coming through by giving this specific character that specific name. Nancy and a group of Oliver Twists, I guess.
Yeah.
But that element of having sort of a compassionate view of the poor and the struggling is really endearing.
Yeah.
And it gives her you feel for her so much, and even early on when she's being quite strict with the rules of everyone takes one piece, and then she gets kind of shitty at the Doctor, it's still kind of funny because that she really cares underneath that, and she's clearly been through a lot.
Yeah.
As we will find out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that shines through with the reveal that Nancy is Jamie's mother, or the empty child's mother. And just adding to the replayability, I'm not sure how telegraphed the reveal is, because unfortunately I was spoiled on this before I saw the story for the first time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Do you remember that in high school there was a Doctor Who club at one point?
Very, very vaguely. I remember, I think we used to occasionally watch episodes during
lunchtime.
Yeah.
I walked in on one of those meetings at the back end of this story, and
Oof.
This reveal was ruined for me. I think I walked in on Dalek at one point as well, and
wow,
it was during the rampages. But yeah, I mean, I was spoiled on this reveal, so I never got to know when I would have pieced it together properly. But even if you don't, and it's saved until the end, it's an effective moment when, you know, she sort of starts breaking down, and the doctor's like, "How's it your fault?" And then he just hears all the gas mask zombies saying "mummy" over and over again.
Yeah. And then he realizes, it's a great sort of a, show don't tell moment.
Yeah, it's a really lovely way of having Nancy not just come out and say, "Because I'm his mother, okay, Doctor."
Yeah. And to have the Doctor, using his
empathy,
analytical sort of brain, but also his empathy to understand, oh, I see what's happening here, which is really great.
It also makes the gas mask zombies themselves, and the way that the empty child keeps repeating, "Are you my mummy?" It makes that even more tragic for Nancy, because presumably, she has raised Jamie pretending that she was his sister. So when she keeps hearing him ask, "Are you my mummy?" that's gotta cut to the core.
Yeah, there's I think, presumably there's some guilt there. There's some obvious distress, and I don't know, even a wish for just to be in better circumstances.
Oh yeah.
Because she's she's clearly presented as someone who is struggling and doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, I imagine, a teen pregnancy in that sort of background in this particular period in history would have been extremely difficult.
Oh, yeah, instant outcast from society.
So, yeah, absolutely. So all of those wonderful nuances of the tragedy are just sort of really coming through. And the fact that they're so well set up.
Yeah. Well, it
makes that ending so satisfying.
It makes a lot of her actions make so much more sense, because when you rewatch the story, knowing that she's a mother, the way she's not only the way she's looking after the kids, but also the way that she's one piece per, chew your food, all this motherly stuff that she's saying, it just makes so much sense. Yeah.
And even the small bit when she's comforting one of the kids when he's trying to write the letter, which is really nice.
And when one child doesn't leave the dinner table when Jamie's walking in, and she goes, it's just like a game, like chase, like a game.
Yeah.
It's so motherly, and like I said, that's why I wish I knew if I would have picked up on it before the reveal. But rewatching it, knowing everything, it's like, yeah, it's all there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the way that all great twists work. That it at least has as much impact on the second, third, fourth time viewing as it does kind of the first time, but it's just in a different way.
But then to praise the writing even more, "Are you my mummy" being this central theme for the characters the whole way through factors into the plot significantly at the end, when it turns out that information is paramount to rewriting the nanogenes. It fits together so goddamn well.
Yeah, it's expertly written. And it just, the core of it is just anchored by this real drama with real serious stakes. And doing, I think, what a lot of great Doctor Who episodes do, and arguably what a lot of great sci-fi does, by, yes, you can argue, there's all this wacky timey-wimey stuff. We've got suave gentleman rogue from time and space. We've got freaky gas mask zombies. But at the end of the day, it's about these really, really human themes. And you really just, you feel that emotion. I also I'm going to give a small shout out to a great bit of characterization with Nancy, but also of Rose, when they're at I think they're at the bomb site, and they're talking about, how terrible the world is. And Rose basically reveals, Nancy, this isn't the end. The Germans don't win. You guys win. I'm from your future, and it's just so emotionally powerful, because I think, and I don't know whether it's because we're in a third year of a pandemic, but it's one of those situations where you feel for those characters, because you just think, how shitty things can get, and you sit there thinking, how can the world go back to, I don't know, the peace that it once knew? But that kind of ray of hope, it really just sort of carries the emotional weight of everything that's happening in the story, and it makes the ending, the very ending where, as the Doctor says, everybody lives, so unbelievably emotionally satisfying. Again, I got pretty damn emotional when I watched this episode even a second time.
Everybody Lives is just such a powerful moment.
It is.
Not just for like this story, but for the Doctor himself.
Yeah.
It's
Because he's just been through his
he's been-
species getting
yeah,
genocided.
he's been through the
basically.
Time War, and in pretty much every story prior to this point, there's been at least some element of death, where
Yeah.
he's lost someone.
There's a cost.
Yes, there's always been a cost, and the fact that on this rare moment, everybody lives. It means so much to him, and he's so happy about it.
Yeah.
Like Christopher Eccleston's performance in that one line is just it always like, you know how sometimes you get you're watching something and it's like you get so happy that you get like shivers.
Yeah.
It does that
Yeah, it gives
every
you
single.
chills,
It gives me
sure.
chills every single time I watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the reasons why that ending works so well is because the stakes are really, really high, because this is not just sort of some standard, oh, the world's gonna end situation. It's kind of worse than that. Yeah, the human race will kind of go on, but they're all going to be gas mask zombies now. Nothing's going to happen for the species. Nothing good, nothing bad. They're just gonna exist as these empty shells wandering around, asking for their mother. That's it.
Well, I think it's also
And
because like the entire
Really terrifying.
it's also like the entire episode is by design pretty dark. Not just because
Yeah.
it's all set at night, which should have been a clue, but the entire episode, I wouldn't really describe this episode as like it's not scary in the sense that you'll be screaming at any point, or like, you know, there's minimal jump scares, but the entire thing is just really unsettling and creepy.
It is. It's very disturbing.
Yeah, so
and the fact
I think that's why I think that's another reason why the ending works so well, because it's such a juxtaposition of everything the story's been. You know, the way it's been, it starts off kind of unsettling and a little bit tense, and the way that that just builds throughout this entire story, all the way up to the moment when Nancy tells Jamie she's his mother, and then from that point onwards, everything after and including the Doctor taking off Jamie's gas mask is just so happy.
Yeah.
And it works so much. Setting up all the doom and gloom and then being like, boom, it's a good ending. You weren't expecting that after an hour and a half of dark.
Yeah, especially because, just sort of putting this into context with Doctor Who generally, as you know, any classic fan knows that the show, even in the classic era, gets really, really dark. I hesitate to do this, to talk to you about this, because it would be a bit of a spoiler for the Daleks Master Plan, which I haven't seen all of, but I know the basic plot beats. Do you mind, or do you want to leave it?
I don't know. If you hesitate to tell me, I think I'd rather trust that impulse.
Suffice it to say, like there are some pretty shocking, devastating bits in that story, as far as I'm aware. But even other stories like Attack of the Cybermen, that is how you do doom and gloom in Doctor Who badly, because that episode, especially episode 2, is really miserable, and it doesn't really seem to be adding up to much.
Yeah.
So we know, in context of the whole show, but I think especially with the season, because obviously the Doctor's reeling from the Time War, we know the stakes are real. Yeah, we know that, and given how sort of the vastness of time and space is, and given how, you know, the Doctor's the only Time Lord left, you really actually start to get worried that this could be the end of the whole human race. We literally, the episode before this, we nearly saw the end with the Reapers coming in, so it's not impossible.
Yeah.
The fact that they're able to, that Moffat is able to sort of utilize those stakes as well as he does is yeah, it's certainly admirable, but it's just purely emotionally resonant. It's really, really chilling. So when it all comes right in the end, and we get that genuinely happy ending, it is so satisfying, because not only is it a contrast to what we've seen in this episode, it's a contrast to what we've seen in the season, and it's a contrast to what we've seen in Doctor Who more generally. Because again, even though for a good chunk of it in the classic series, for instance, it is kind of a bit of a fun romp around time and space. Again, a lot of the time there are real stakes and there are some pretty damn chilling episodes. Um, so again, even if you're a classic fan like me, you know that stuff can get pretty full on.
Yeah,
So the fact that Moffat is able to kind of pull that off with this bit of expertly crafted sentiment is really quite brilliant,
yeah.
genius, really.
And
So
I
good for
miss
him.
I miss the way that early Moffat really stuck the landing with stuff that he set up.
Mm-hmm.
Especially around the middle of his era of the show, you tend to
Mm-hmm.
notice a pattern where it's like he sets up something, but it's clear it's just because he wanted that to happen. Like there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of moments where it's like, why did that happen? Oh, you thought it'd be a cool moment, and you didn't think
Yep,
about
absolutely.
beginning and end, did you? Like we're gonna see
Yep.
it a lot around the end of the Smith era and the beginning of the Capaldi era, especially. But it's kind of
Yep.
present throughout his entire run.
Mm.
Occasionally, things happen because he thought there would be good moments in isolation, and often they
Mm-hmm.
are. But The Witch's Familiar especially has so
Yeah,
many of
that's
those
the big one
moments.
for
There
me.
are so
Yeah.
many of those moments in that story, and we'll absolutely get there. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm happy that at least with this story, he seems to have thought everything through. He's clearly had the thought
Yep.
process of, I want to do a zombie thing. Oh, but I can't do zombies. How can I make it like a little easier? I'll have people walking around in gas masks. Why are they being turned into gas mask people? We'll have there be microscopic machines that think they're fixing everyone. Why? Because
Mm.
they found a body that looked like that. Who was that original body? Let's make it a child. That'll make things extra creepy. Who was the child? It was this girl's mum. What's her story? Well, she's being motherly because her brother died. How's the story? How do I wrap things up? Oh, I know. I'll have the mother confess to Jamie, and that'll make the nanogenes go, wait, this is what they're meant to look like? Okay, cool. We'll fix that real quick.
I think the nanogenes is the way they're integrated into the story is really great because it seems like something where like they're viewed as a positive force, yeah? Like they
Mm,
can heal wounds, they can fix people up, a woman gets her leg back near the end of
yeah.
at the end of this story. Um but the way they used up until that point is really scary.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a thing that's meant to heal, but it's just poisoning everything, it touches. And it's really just so chilling and horrifying. It seems it almost feels wrong. Like even by Doctor Who End of the World standards, you sit there thinking these are meant to be helping people. Why are we having this horrifying situation where they're going to basically destroy the human race? And it's like, oh well, they haven't been programmed properly. They saw the first living thing, and oh, I guess that's a human now, so we've got to do that. But again, this just goes back to how Moffat is able to use these really chilling setups and
Mm.
have them pay off so spectacularly
I think
with
there's a more
the
horror.
beautiful ending.
I think there's a more horrifying implication that nanogenes can just bring people back to life,
Mm,
like it's nothing.
mm.
Like
Yeah, that's true.
that's got. I mean, at a certain point, nanogenes must be rare
Mm,
because otherwise there would be no concept of death
mm.
in any of the Doctor Who universes. Like, oh no, someone died. Let's order some nanogenes in while the body's still
Yeah,
fresh. Let's
just
fix this up real quick. I have to imagine that
yeah.
like the Chula people are like the
Mm,
only ones that have these nanogenes because it's a Chula
mm,
ambulance. Jack's Chula
yeah.
warship has them.
Mm,
Maybe they're rare, and maybe they all got deprogrammed or destroyed at some point. I mean, that's not unreasonable to think that.
mm.
History is
Yeah, yeah,
long.
which is fair. Mm,
But also, on the nanogenes, real quick as well. Like even before you find out that they're the ones responsible for all this, they're foreshadowed really nicely. They fix up Rose and the Doctor's hands in the ship, and you just think, okay, that's just a fun sci-fi thing that they threw in. Um, a reason why we can justify Rose hanging from a barrage balloon and her hands
mm,
being fine later in the story. It's like, oh no, of
mm,
course she got rope burn, and the
mm,
nanogenes fixed her up.
mm,
Fine sci-fi thing.
mm.
Now, getting stuck hanging from a barrage balloon, maybe not the smartest thing that's ever happened to a character, any other character gets into that situation, I would say Moffat put that character there because he needed to introduce Jack to the story, and having him save her is a fine enough way to do that. Any other character that happens to, I'm like, well, this didn't happen because it's part of that character, and this isn't something that happened because it's something that character would do. It's something that happened because you needed to get a character to a position. But this is Rose we're talking about,
and here we go.
And we're currently on, well, clearly getting trapped above the city of London. That's got to count for Rose getting captured or trapped. And at this point, we're on number 6, I think. Yeah, 6 in a row. 6 in a row for Rose getting captured or trapped somewhere. And it's in the first 5 minutes of the story. That's got to be some kind of record.
I guess so. I don't mind the fact that, like, the fact that she wanders off, like, they make it quite justified, because obviously, there's a child in danger.
She's going after a kid. I don't mind that. What I have an issue with more is he's up on top of this roof thing, and you see there's no way up there.
Yeah.
A rope appears. Don't bother checking what it's attached to. Don't bother having a look and go, if I start climbing this, is there, like, what is this? Where did this come from? Just start climbing immediately. And then when it's clear that it's attached to a balloon, she holds onto it for a considerable amount of time, even though there's a pretty big window which you can let go and land on the roof and everything will be fine. Like, it's not that huge a drop. It's only about her body length. That's just jumping. And she decides to hang on to it until she's dangling over London during the Blitz. And again, any other character, I would say that's not a reasonable thing for them to do. But this is firmly established with Rose's character that this is absolutely something she would do.
I guess, because even like with other companions, for instance, like people like Donna and Martha, like, they have that sense of adventure, but they probably wouldn't make that sort of mistake. I mean, I assume you've got your own thoughts on that, but
100% none of them would. Maybe Donna would, out of a sense of, like, Donna's reckless in that regard. I can see her doing that. Martha is way more cautious. There's no way that Martha would in any day of the week. Yeah, and I know when I say this has got to be the quickest any companion has ever gotten captured or trapped. Instantly, my mind went to Gridlock when Martha gets abducted to go onto the fast lane of the thing. And again, I will say, well, at least in that story, she's still actively taking an involvement throughout. She's piecing stuff together. She's making steps to get back to the Doctor or save these people who are being attacked by the Macra. Rose's only other thing she does in this story, apart from reattach barbed wire for 30 seconds, is to fawn over Jack. Again. You know my feelings on this.
Yep.
And essentially, when we get her role in part 1 is to fawn over Jack. Her role in part 2 is for the Doctor and Jack to essentially compete over her. That's the subtext of the whole dancing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Doctor's animosity towards Jack is, at the very least, at a slim level. It's not 100% because Rose likes him. Obviously, it's because he's caused the whole mess. But there is that underlying level there.
Yep.
To the point where there is a line where Jack reads the psychic paper and they address Mickey Smith. This time they address him. They say, oh yeah, you are currently in a relationship, but you don't think it's a big deal. That's the subtext of the line. That's what the line is. That is abject confirmation that Rose is doing something incredibly shitty and knows it.
Yeah, because what's the line? It's like, but you consider yourself single and
footloose and fancy-free, available, very available, is the exact string of descriptors that describes Rose. And when she hears that, her only response is, no. Like, she doesn't go, huh? Oh, that's not true, what the fuck?
And I guess because it's psychic paper.
Yeah.
Like,
it's, even if you could interpret that as Jack, like, putting a move on Rose, the fact that she doesn't deny it is like, okay, yeah, he's got me. And then later, when they're on the roof of Jack's ship near Big Ben, she's like, is this the best time to come on to me? And he's like, yeah, you're right, it's not. Moves away. And Rose is like, oh, I didn't say stop. Which you should. if you're in a committed
Hmm.
relationship. And then in the same scene, as Jack is describing the events that are going to happen with the warship, the ambulance, she gets so distracted by Jack's, his suaveness, which, fair enough.
His charisma,
His charisma, which, fair enough, it's John Barrowman. But she gets so distracted by that she completely zones out everything he's saying. She says something like, I think you were talking for a minute there. Like, please, for the love of God, tell me you were watching these scenes and you weren't thinking stuff like, I bet Cuff's going to have a freak out of this.
Oh, yeah,
and instead we're actually thinking, okay, no, I see it now.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed all of those details, but definitely the bit where he's, well, first off, yeah, the bits where she's basically openly flirting with Jack, and then when he's got the psychic paper and says, "Oh, you're footloose and fancy free." I'm like, wow, Cuff is gonna have some issues, I'm sure, when we're talking about this. I don't doubt that this must have infuriated him to a considerable degree. And as I've said before, I don't think I quite have that gut reaction that you do, but it is completely understandable that you have those reservations, because they're, as you've said before, they're not even addressing the infidelity as a negative thing, and they're being so sort of blatant about it. It's just a thing that's happening, and the audience just has to kind of accept it.
They're gonna address infidelity in the next episode, and they're gonna do it in the worst possible way. We'll see how that all goes down in Boomtown. You won't believe how the show talks about infidelity in that one. It boggles the mind. God, but
sorry, the way you just described that just sounded like the title of a clickbait article.
Doctors can't get enough of well, literally, doctor. But to the point where Rose is like, she's being hostile towards Jack when he's got her trapped in the light field, and he's doing the whole roller coaster thing where it's like, keep your arms and legs inside the light field, and she's pretty hostile, which, fair enough. I'm hanging above London. Don't banter. Rescue me, goddammit. But then as soon as she sees his face, she's like, "Ooh, hi."
Yeah.
Which to me is like, okay, so not only are you practicing infidelity, but you're also acting upon really surface level stuff where it's all about looks with you. It's all about attractiveness. Like, he's doing something. He's in the scene literally prior to that. He's doing something which you find annoying, and you're actively yelling at him. But then the second you see his face, it's like, oh, forget all that. Oh, hubba hubba.
And I think you've said before that your problem with Rose, it's a combination of a few things. It's not just the infidelity, it's the way it's framed in the narrative, but also just the way she treats the people in her life.
Yeah.
Mickey in particular. And I think, again, don't have the same gut reaction, but as I watch more of these episodes, I start to realize, oh, yeah, you know what? This is not great. It's, yeah, not a great characterization. And there's not... I don't know if I'd say that framing her infidelity in this way, I don't know if it's super deliberate, but it's one of those things where you just think, couldn't someone have said something? Like, someone in the writer's room just stuck their hand up and said, hey, you know how our main heroine's been, cheating on her boyfriend throughout the whole season? Should we maybe address that? So yeah, that's just how I interpret it.
Well, look, it's yet another episode this season where Rose is there, but really a lot of the action is done by the Doctor and the side cast. The Doctor's the one that pieces everything together. Nancy is the one that resolves the conflict, and Jack is the one that also resolves the conflict by taking the bomb away. Yeah. They're the ones with the growth. They're the ones with the arc. And Rose is unchanged by the end of the episode. Again.
That's true. I mean, it's interesting, but it kind of goes back to what I sort of said with Aliens of London World War III, but this is an instance where I understand why this part of the characterization frustrates you, because the side characters are more interesting than Rose. Nancy is
Yeah.
a great side character. Jack is really interesting. Even Dr. Constantine has a lot of nuances, but like, you're not wrong to point out that Rose certainly doesn't really have any character growth here. So I think I understand some of that frustration.
It's interesting that the episode, or at the very least the story this season, that has had the Doctor and Rose physically together in the same place for the most amount of the story, it's the long game. And both of them have fuck all to do in that story anyway. Episode 1, a lot of the mystery is about, Rose figuring out who the Doctor is and researching him. Episode 2, End of the World, he's with Jabe most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 3, she gets taken out of the action for the first chunk of the story, and Charles Dickens is there.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens in London World War III, for a lot of the first episode, Doctor's off doing his own thing while Rose is dealing with family stuff, and then Harriet's also there in that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Dalek,
Mickey and Jackie get a spotlight too.
Well, I'm mainly talking about the Doctor and Rose in terms of what they're doing.
Yeah.
In Dalek, Rose is separated from the Doctor the entire episode. Long game, they're together for the most. Here, they're separated again in part 1, then they're together for a lot in part 2, but again, Jack's there for a lot of it. In Boomtown, we're going to see the Doctor interacting with Margaret Blaine for most of the runtime, and Rose is going to do Mickey stuff. Bad Wolf, she's isolated in Weakest Link, and then on the Dalek ship, and then in Parting of the Ways, the Doctor sends her back to contemporary London. The show seems allergic to developing the Doctor-Rose dynamic. They're not together for most of the season, I would say. Which leaves the Doctor to influence other side characters to, step in and do actual story stuff. Mm-hmm. At which point, Rose is only there to do side stuff with some characters sometimes, as well as get taken out of the action in favor of other character arcs. Why is she everyone's favorite companion?
I'd wondered, if I may ask, is there a consensus there on that? I'm not sure.
At the very least, a lot of people tend to have a fondness for Rose. I don't know about now. I don't know where she ranks in terms. Actually, I can look up a best companions ranked survey and see what the modern consensus is. Here we go. The first link I find, the best 15 companions ranked. I'm not sure. Is this a survey or is this just something that one writer did? I don't know. I don't know. I think this is just one person, but Wilfred is 15th, which is atrocious. Oh, this is including classic companions, by the way. Martha at 9. Number 8, it's Barbara and Ian as a collective.
Martha should be higher, I think.
Yeah, number 7, it's Amy and Rory. Number 6 is Ace.
Ace should be higher.
Clara's 5. The Brigadier's 4. Donna's 3. Rose is 2, and Sarah Jane is 1.
Yeah, so Donna and Martha should definitely be higher. Ace should definitely be higher. And yeah, I certainly don't think Rose should be number 2.
Well, again, I think that was like just a one person saying, here are the companions in there. Maybe that was surrounding like effect on the show. I think Rose being the first companion back might have. Okay, who was your favorite modern Doctor Who companion? This was done in 9th of June 2020. Yeah, this is a poll. So it's a user-submitted poll.
Yeah.
I am going to click on Donna. Hang on. You can vote for one option. Oh, god damn it, this poll's been disabled. It's... The poll has ended, so I can't add to it, and also can't see the results. Oh no, click here to submit.
Sucks.
Nope, that's a different thing. God damn it! I just want to find something. Reddit favorite New Who companion poll from 2017. Again, I'm gonna click Donna. I've clicked all the images with taxis for this recapture. That's interesting. So Yeah, the top 3: Amy, Donna, Rose.
Right. Yeah, Martha should definitely be higher.
Out of 112, Rose got 19 votes, and Martha got 4.
Oh well, that's just not true.
Yeah,
Like
see, like,
that's a yeah, fair enough.
I'm not
fair
sure
enough.
if like she's everyone's favorite companion, but at the very least, she's
She's
more
more popular than she should be. Yeah.
she's way more popular than she should be.
Hmm.
Like, when you actually look at what she does in this first season, anyway.
Or what she doesn't do.
That's my point. What she does is, and what she doesn't do are the same thing, which is nothing.
Hmm.
And again, like, these aren't even my only issues with the character. There's different stuff in season 2 that I hate with her.
Didn't you say there's a whole bunch of new problems that kind of come into her characterization in the second season?
Yeah, well, in season 2, she replaces infidelity for codependency, which I think is just as bad.
Right.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sift through it. Now that you've had your slightly
I was going to say, you want to do your Moffatisms?
Yes, I would. So again, it's very curious, but the Moffatisms involved here, as I said, they don't really bother me as a standalone thing. But just given my strong feelings for Moffat, I can't help but notice them.
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of these are just sort of writing quirks that he has that become a lot worse when they're more consistent in the show, when he doesn't just get one story at a time.
Yeah. So it even goes down to tiny little sort of hardline edit things, like when he says something like, "Oh, it's dangerous and it's mauve." That feels like a Moffat line. When he says bananas are good, I instantly had to flinch because all I can think of is bow ties are cool.
Yeah, I knew you would draw that comparison.
I had to. Oh god, that really just got under my skin.
I will say there is like, I think good and cool are very, like, there's different connotations there, I think. Like,
yeah, but like the rhythm and the tenor of that line just stabbed into my brain. So there's that. But even something like when he tells the gas mask zombies to go into their room, it works.
Oh yeah.
There's nothing really wrong with it, but for me, it almost feels out of place for the Ninth Doctor, because it's a line I could easily imagine Matt Smith saying it. I could imagine Peter Capaldi saying it.
See, I really can't imagine Matt Smith saying it, in all honesty.
Really?
Yeah, I can't. Like, he's taking a fatherly approach in that scene, and that's not an aspect of the Matt Smith Doctor that I really think about, because Matt Smith is the cool cousin.
Yeah.
Doctor. And,
fair enough.
If your cousin told you to go to your room, it would be really out of place. But just real quick before you continue, I'll tell you the reason I really like that cliffhanger. The way it's resolved, it is something that's resolved before the opening titles of the next, episode. But it's something that has an effect later in the episode. He sends it to its room to get out of the cliffhanger, and then later it traps them in his room.
In the room,
like
which is very clever.
It is clever, and it's a way of it's a way of introducing the hive mind of the child that will become paramount in the ending.
Yeah, and have the child slowly realizing how much power it has, and also in that scene, the child's their use of language expands, because the child says, "I'm coming to find you," and it's like, so like it's the child is thinking more. You know what I mean? So that's a really great bit as well. But for me, again, perhaps you're right in saying that it's not really a line Matt Smith could say. You understand, I think, that version of the Doctor better than I do. But there's just some like a comedic element to that line that it just feels slightly jarring for me, knowing that I think at least that sort of thing would happen again a fair bit in Moffat's tenure. Having said that, again, it works fine in this episode. It's one of those elements where, as I said, it may be a Moffatism, but it is at worst it's benign. It doesn't take away anything from the story, and at best it really helps it. So that's cool. So there's that. I think for me, the biggest Moffatism that I find here actually is the ending. And the reason why is because the idea of the nanogenes sort of fixing everything by realizing who Jamie's mother really is. It's okay. This is a bit hard to explain, but
Well, considering that we just spent the last hour praising that resolution in
yeah.
terms of its full circle,
Mm.
this is going to have to be really strong.
um, I wouldn't call it a Deus Ex Machina, but there's a quality to it that makes me think of similar endings that really frustrate me in the Moffat era, because the way I interpret that scene, and again, perhaps you feel differently than I, but so the Doctor, he's obviously doing a lot to get the plot going, and he's facilitating the whole thing. He's obviously getting, Nancy to where she needs to be, both physically, in the bomb site, but also emotionally sort of pushing her to, embrace her son. All fantastic. But that element of something that already had been established way at the beginning, that fixing the whole thing, and the Doctor himself, him not putting in the last tiny stroke, the last nail in the coffin, that element, again, here, works brilliantly. Love it, love it, love it. But I feel like that happens a fair bit in the Moffat era, and it does frustrate me. So, best example I can think of, Twice Upon a Time. They're in World War One. It's been a while since I've seen the episode, but from memory, they're about to get shot by soldiers. But oh, wait a minute, it's snowing. What's happening here?
Well,
it's Christmas Eve.
see, I think
Yay, we're not gonna die.
I think you've picked the absolute wrong example on that, because the Doctor has a line where he actively says that he's in the span of time where time is frozen, he's pushed time forward a couple hours in order to actually have it happen at the right time.
Fair enough.
I think it's interesting that you didn't cite literally any other episode this season where it's always been a different character that has been the one that fixes the problem. This entire season, the Doctor only resolves cliffhangers and minor things. He is never the one that takes the final step to solving things, which is something that's going to come up in the finale as like a sort of statement of intent for this season of TV. And especially here, the way we've talked about it tying into the characters, the emotional arc for Nancy. I can see why you've highlighted it as a Moffat problem, though. I'm trying to think of other Moffat stories that do the same thing. No, every other Moffat story in season 5, it's the Doctor that solves the problem. Season 6, again, that's the Doctor. River does it in Let's Kill Hitler, but that's only because the problem is the Doctor's dying. Doctor solves it at the end of season 6. Season 7, it's Clara, then Amy Rory sacrifice. I'm just running through the Moffat written stories.
Yeah, no worries.
Clara sacrifice in The Snowman. Doctor does it in Bells of St. John. Again, it's a Clara thing in Name of the Doctor. Doctor thing. Doctor. Yeah, the Doctor takes way more of an active involvement in resolving conflicts in the Moffat era than he does in the RTD era. So I'm not sure why you've highlighted this as a Moffat problem. Maybe it happens in a lot of stories in the Moffat era that aren't explicitly written by Stephen Moffat, is something that you've highlighted. I don't know, like I can't actively say that you're wrong though, because you might be thinking of stories I'm forgetting at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's just I think it's something that'll be interesting to look out for in the future. But
yeah,
and I mean, especially because towards the end of the Russell T Davies era in Joni's End, they have a big montage of all the characters that have made the sacrifice play for the Doctor. I don't know. I think it's way more of a thing in the RTD era than the Moffat era, personally. But again, we'll see as time goes on. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true. I could be wrong again. This is. I'm coming into this with a bias, and again, as I've said, it works brilliantly here. It's fantastic because it's all anchored with this real sense of, the emotional tragedy, which is wonderful. But it's just something that I noticed because it's again, I feel like it's something that happens in the future. Again, perhaps I'm
Well,
wrong though.
I might be misinterpreting what your actual problem is.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough.
I don't know if you just have an issue with other characters resolving the conflict. It may be something a bit more
Deeper than that,
specific than
yeah.
that. But hey,
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, this is perhaps the first thing in this podcast that we have outright disagreed on.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of other issues I have, again, not with this ending, but what it sort of foreshadows. Um,
Well,
and again,
it does set up the Moffat era's seeming its allergy to actually having characters die.
I don't. Well, that it goes a bit deeper than that for me. I don't. I feel like there are a lot of moments in the Moffat era where there's a lot of sentiment, and I feel like there's too much of it, and I think in the past it has gotten on my nerves. So if we go back to again, the Twice Upon a Time, there is just something, and I get that, as you say, the Doctor is taking an active role by moving time forward a few hours. But man, there was something that drove me up the wall when I saw it. It's like, oh, get it, guys? It's Christmas and it's fine. And oh, what's your last name? Lethbridge Stewart? Yeah, I'll look after your son. Christ on the cross. That just drove me insane when I watched it.
That Brigadier thing was kind of painful in that story.
Oh God! Oh, or even the other Brigadier thing with the
Cybermen?
that Cybermen episode. Jesus, like it's. Remember the Brigadier, guys? Remember him? He's back now. I know you loved him. I'm bringing back that old lovable crank, and we're gonna force that bit of sentiment in there until it kills you. So,
I think
those
I see what you mean. I see what you mean, though. Like you have an issue with sentiment when it's not baked into the narrative.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Because there was a period in my, late teens, early 20s, which I think a lot of people go through this, where I was, I don't know, a bit edgy. And I'm like, I think I actually said to one of my uni tutors in my last class of my undergrad, I said to her that I'm allergic to over sentimentality, that I can't stand it when it's there. Now, I think I've changed a lot over the last few years. I actually realized, no, there's a definite reason why we have sentimentality in stories, because fact is, life can be extremely shitty, and we need those stories to uplift us. It's not necessary for every story, but it's good when we find them. And I find even nowadays, when I write, I try to put more sentiment in it than I used to. So, I've matured, I think, a lot from that point, but the Moffat era of Doctor Who kind of reminds me why it was a problem in the first place. It reminds me, oh, this is why I didn't like sentimentality. Because when it's just sort of forced through and is there, it just when it exists, gets my goat.
When it exists in spite of the story.
Yeah, when it's just... And it's... I don't know, there are a lot of, again, Moffatisms that kind of feed into each other. If you want to, just taking back to the Doctors, when they do or do not take, an active role, one thing I noticed a lot in the Moffat era, and perhaps it's not as bad as I'm imagining it in my mind, but there are a lot of the Doctor is great speeches, where I feel like the Doctor's not doing anything. You just get a bunch of characters telling us, oh, he's traveled through time and space, and he mends the web of time when it breaks, and the Doctor's saving the day, and the wonderful person, and I just sit there thinking, can we just get the Doctor doing something? Can we please not have another bit of River crying, saying, "Oh, Doctor, don't you know how much you mean to people?" Again, I'm more than willing to admit that maybe I'm exaggerating that in my mind. It could just be something that I latched onto because it was different or weird, but it just...
Look,
things like that. It's like, it's the sentimentality and the lack of the Doctor doing something coming together in this really frustrating, this Moffatism. And it goes to the core, I think, of what the biggest problem I had with Moffat's era, which is when I first started watching it, and I think this even started from the 11th hour, because it's got that ending where it's like, the Doctor's like, oh, hello, evil alien threat, you don't want to face me, look at all these aliens that have, been defeated by me, and it's just a montage, and I'm like, really? Is that what we're doing? But anyway, the core of the issue, that all this sort of leads into is I felt like from Moffat's era, Doctor Who changed from Doctor Who to the Stephen Moffat Power Hour, and I'm not against having a unique sort of auteur vision for even television. I love, auteur directors in film. But like, this is not Breaking Bad, yeah? This is Doctor Who, and having it turn into this sort of vehicle for Moffat to put in all these narrative quirks, which became worse over time, to the point where they're as frustrating as they are. Another really good example, and again, I apologize for all the tangents. When Davros opens his eyes, when they have that really lame, I think it's like a Return of the Jedi sort of callback where it's like, oh yeah, let me look at you with my own eyes. I'm like, why is that there? Not to mention the fact that, I mean, I'm going into the Big Finish audio lore here, but like, it's basically established that Davros's eyes were burnt out of his skull during the explosion. Why are we having this bit of sentiment in this story? And when you add that with the super twisty, didn't see that coming ending of that episode, that and everything else I've just mentioned is just indicative of why I find Moffat's era.
All right, cool. I'm going to have to cut you off there, lest you go on
which
forever.
Is fine, because yes, I will keep going on.
Sure, there's a lot to address. I'm going to try and take this point by point.
Sure.
Sort of the mythicalizing the Doctor, which I think was your the first point you made anyway, where there's a lot of speeches about how great the Doctor is.
One of the big ones, yeah.
I certainly can't say that's the case with the Capaldi era, because one of the first arcs that is brought up for Capaldi is the question of whether he's a good man or not.
Yeah.
It's certainly there in the Smith era. There are a lot of moments like that. Yeah. But even that being considered, that era loved making the Doctor the bad guy. There are a lot of stories where he is either, his form has been taken over by the villain, or he is outright in the wrong. There are a lot of moments of that in the Smith era. So there are, to be fair, a lot of speeches talking about how good he is.
Yeah.
I would say that is a significantly more problem in the Whittaker era, when all the shades of grey are removed from the character completely. Yeah. But I don't understand your problem with it there. What was your next thing that you said?
I think the use of sentimentality.
I think that was before that.
How it feels. What else was there? Oh, yeah, the fact that I think I said the fact that it goes from Doctor Who to the Stephen Moffat Power Hour, and that it's not. I don't know. It just.
I know I had a thought while you were saying it, but
that's all right.
I will say my main problem with the Davros opening his eyes scene isn't even that it happened. It's the fact that it happened, and then almost immediately afterwards it reveals, oh no, Davros wasn't being sincere. And as it turns out, neither was the Doctor, so that moment is pointless.
That's right. That, I think, is one of the things. I mean, don't get me wrong, the moment itself bothered me, but
the moment itself I didn't have a problem with, purely based on the performances. Mm-hmm. When you find out that Davros was tricking the Doctor, I was like, But then when you find out that, but then when the Doctor says, "Oh no, I knew what you were doing the whole time. I was prepared." Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, well, fuck you then, Stephen Moffat.
That was the bit I think that really bothered me.
That's my when I say Moffat loves putting in moments without thinking about what comes before or after. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. He wanted to have a moment of the Doctor and Davros truly connecting, but then he didn't think about its place.
He ruined it with the super twisting.
Well, he didn't think about its place in the story, like. It makes sense if Davros is trying to steal the Doctor's regeneration energy. It makes sense that he would take that angle. But the Doctor immediately going, no, but you see, I was playing 3D chess too, makes the entire thing pointless.
And it also goes to another small, well, maybe not small, but another point I have, which you also touched on earlier in this episode, which is I find a lot of Moffat's two-parters that he wrote during his era, there were problems where the setups aren't being paid off well. The Witch's Familiar being probably one of the biggest ones. So, yeah. Now, I hope you and the audience don't mind the fact that I just ranted about that for the last 10 minutes. God knows how long that was.
I think it was closer to 15.
We will definitely get into this. we will get into this in more detail when we get to the Moffat era, but that's basically all the grievances I have with the Moffat era. So
Yeah.
just getting that out there.
Just it's interesting that you highlight the ending of this episode, and then you go, but this is a problem in other episodes. And it's like, well, I appreciate you seeding that, but like, it did take us 15 minutes out of our way to get there.
Yes, pardon me.
I'm just mainly saying this as like, we've got 3 more Moffat stories to get through before his era begins, and then I'll let you truly unleash.
Yeah.
But I mean, as a point of reference, I'm not trying to put you on blast in front of our huge audience, but
yeah.
when like Amy or Clara or Martha or Rodonna gets captured at any point, I won't use that as a springboard to go, you know what, this reminds me of Rose getting captured, and you know what, that's a bigger problem there. I mean, it's fine here because it serves the story and characters, but then it was a big problem because, I hate Rose.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like, you know, I'm glad we had this tangent anyway, just to set us up for what's to come. In many ways, it's appropriate because this episode inadvertently set up a lot of Moffatisms that we'll see in the future, and this episode of the podcast set up a Fitzism that we'll see in significantly more depth in maybe a year when we finally get to Series 5.
Yeah.
But for now, we should probably wrap up this discussion. So, Empty Child, Dr. Dancers, where would you rank it?
A 9. Easy.
Yep, I agree. It's a 9 out of 10. I think I agree with you. I think the Dalek is the better episode.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no denying that this is wonderful.
Oh, it's fantastic, and I think the only reason like I'm not giving it a 10 is for me like Dalek. And I know you didn't give it a 10, but for me like Dalek, that's like the gold standard for me. Like that's such an amazing, groundbreaking episode, doing so much with an old villain. This. It's only a 9, but like by comparison, like it's doing so many wonderful things, but it's just not like completely obliterating my mind with all the revolutionary stuff it's doing. But it's still doing what it's doing really, really well. The only other thing I do want to just bring up slightly, and I highlighted this at the beginning of the podcast, there are just tiny little details in some of the editing that kind of bother me. There's that one shot where it's like the camera quickly zooms in on the empty child and you hear that really cliched, I don't know, it's like a whip sound or a fire sound going off, which is a very sort of mid-2000s thing to do.
Are you talking about the shot where the camera sort of twists and like curves and then zooms in on the empty child?
Yeah.
Is this shortly after they activate the ambulance and it's calling the troops in?
Yes, it is.
See, I understand why they did that, because it's sort of a simulation of the signal from the ambulance reaching the child.
Oh yeah, no, I'm fine with doing it, but just the way they did it, the direction and the sound editing just seemed a bit slightly contrived to me. Having said that, and I've forgotten the name of the guy who directed it, but I do actually want to give a shout out to the other direction, because the way the rest of the story is directed is actually really well.
It's,
I love
James Hawes.
Sorry?
James Hawes.
Yes. I love that one bit where the phone's ringing. And there's that great, it's almost like a Dutch angle, but they're using a wide-angle lens. And, wide-angle lenses, they always give you a paranoid view of the world. And so it's just little subtle details like that really help elevate the sense of terror. So I just, want to give a shout-out to that, because that was very impressive. But yeah, this is definitely a 9 for me.
Yeah,
easily.
This is a 9 for me as well. I rank this not a 10 for the same reason I rank Dalek as not a 10. It's just for the rose of it all.
Yep.
Both episodes showcase some of the more toxic sides of her personality in this first season. This episode has it significantly worse than in Dalek, because in Dalek it was just mild flirting, whereas here it's outward gawking.
And also, the thoughts I have in my head, he's basically my boyfriend, but not really.
Oh yeah. The hard confirmation that Rose is an awful person in this. And I mean, literally, I don't know how anyone can argue. Literally, if anyone, if in your head you're like, my partner, I do not consider my partner anymore, and I'm going to flirt with other people, and you do not break it off with the first partner, or at least try to fix things, you are a bad person. That's just facts and logic. destroying the Rose sympathizers.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's
Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think this might be our longest episode yet, so I'm willing to call it there.
Yep, same. But as we said, the Fitzism, Moffatisms, we'll get to that.
Oh no, like I'm not innocent in all this. I think in every single revived era episode so far, I've taken the exact same length of time out of an episode to bitch about Rose. So like I could stand to just go and see notes from previous episode. All these problems are still here. Moving on, but I get my piece out. You should be allowed to get yours out when it's appropriate.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so I think we're all done.
We're all
We can wrap
done.
it up.
Yep. Next time we're going to be taking a look at the Fourth Doctor story, The Deadly Assassin.
I'm so excited for that.
Honestly,
It's gonna be
same.
great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to
it's-
discussing this one.
Oh, it'll be great. Yeah, so tune in.
Until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and are you my mummy? You know it had to end that way.